All right. Welcome back to the Forfeit Fatherhood podcast, where we talk about the four pillars of fatherhood: is faith, family, finance, and fitness. And we're back with another edition of the Business of Fatherhood podcast. And this one is business related, but definitely more relationship. Um, Emotional intelligence, right? Emotional intelligence and intellectual intelligence. A lot of times we hear about IQ, but what really works for us in our relationships and in business is EQ, which is emotional intelligence. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that today. I'm also going to talk about what's coming up in the future, a couple of episodes we've got planned, some new guests, and some things that are going on in the family, man. So here we go. All right, so I'm excited, man. I'm really excited to have you guys back. I spent this past weekend at a podcast conference. So I got to, rub elbows with a bunch of different people who are in podcasting. Got to talk to a lot of really interesting people in the industry, and whether you know it or not, the podcast industry is huge and it's only getting bigger. You got guys like Joe Rogan with $200 million deals. And then there's a bunch of us down at the bottom that aren't making anything from it, but are doing it for the love of the game, for the love of sharing the information with our fans, with other like-minded people. And so that's me and that's you. You are the like-minded people. So here's the deal, man. This particular episode, like I said, we're continuing the Business to Fatherhood series. And this particular one is going to be a lot less about business and like money and sales and things like that, and some of the things we've been talking about past episodes, and a little bit more about leadership, and understanding your relationships, the people in those relationships, and how that can affect your overall growth, and kind of where you want things to go. So my guess is most of you, like me, are fathers and want to be better, right? Be better at being a father and doing those fatherhood things, right? So we want to make sure that we're um, being the best example for our children. We want to make sure that we're providing for our children. We want to make sure that we're showing them successful relationships. We want to make sure we're teaching them the things that we feel that they need to know. And so that's what this episode will be about. So I personally, before what kind of spurred me into this is my wife and I were talking one night, as we usually do, we having some kind of like talking about the day, and something had happened. And I really honestly can't remember what it was, but then we start talking about emotions, right? And she will tell you from our past and from my past that I'm pretty nonchalant. I'm pretty middle of the road when it comes to emotions. I don't get too high, I don't get too low. I kind of live in the middle, right? I like to call it my flow, and she likes to say I'm unemotional, right? So depending on who you're asking or who you're talking to, that may be a benefit and it may be a detriment, right? A lot of times when you're dealing with people in a relationship, being able to show and share your emotion is important because they want to know how you feel about them. They want to know how you feel in general. But for me, my upbringing, my life, my situation has kind of forced me or molded me into a person that doesn't allow my emotion to get away from me. I like to be in control of that. If I can be in control of anything else, I'm in control of my attitude and my effort, and my emotion is always rolled into my attitude. So I try to, as much as I possible, be in control of that. So in doing so, I don't get too high, I don't get too low, kind of middle of the road, which again, like I said, can be a detriment. So we're talking, and she's like, well, what did you feel at that time? And I'm like, I don't know, as we normally do. And he was talking about emotions. I'm like, I don't know. I don't know what emotions are. And she started asking me, like, were you happy? Were you angry? Were you sad? And I'm like, I really honestly don't know. I didn't feel really anything. And so she was like, all right, I want you to take a look at some. She's a therapist, right? She's like, look at this emotions wheel. And we pull it up on the we Google it, it pulls up, and there's like 5 emotions in the middle, and there's like 20 things around that, and then like 40 things around that. I'm like, there's no way that all of these things are emotions. Like I'm happy, or I'm sad, or I'm angry. That's it, right? But honestly, fellas, there is like 70 emotions out there, right? There's 70 different types of ways that you feel, and things that go along with that. Like, and it's really important in our relationships with our wives and with our children, that we understand those emotions, right? And so what I did is, once I saw that, I'm like, man, there's so many things that I don't know. I felt like I was a pretty emotionally savvy guy. Like, I do a good job of relating to people and talking to people and being able to kind of judge their emotions and read people. But I felt in that moment emotionally inadequate. Like, I really only can express two emotions: I'm happy or I'm sad, or I'm angry, right? And that's not enough to run a successful family with children who grow up to be successful, with a wife who loves you forever. That thing, you know what I mean? And in business the same way, right? Like, it's hard to be a successful leader if you aren't able to connect with your employees on an emotional level. And I'm not talking about like relationship emotional level. I mean, like, you are able to empathize with them, and in order to kind of get them along the company line to do the things that you need them to do in order for the company to be successful. If you can't empathize with their situation, empathize with their feelings, you're less of a leader and more of a boss. And bosses typically don't get things done unless they do them themselves. Leaders get other people to do the work for them, right? And so our goal is to be a leader, right? So I got that information and I saw all those things. I was like, you know what? I'm gonna try to learn a little bit more about emotional intelligence. And so I got the book, Emotional Intelligence 2.0, which was like I don't know. I mean, it was the first one that came up. 2.0 would lead you to believe that it is the second a second book, and I think it is. But I read that, I got that one, and I was like, yo, I'm gonna dive into this one. Um, and it's pretty good. It's by Travis Bradberry and Gene Greaves. And it explains what EQ is, how you can determine your EQ levels, and a step-by-step program with some actual strategies to improve your 4 core sets of EQ skills, right? And so it's actually a really good book. But what it does, and what the book does for you, is it actually, when you start reading it, it asks you to take a few tests, right? They have a specific test, and I took that one and I took some other ones. But what it does is, it, in those 4 core sets of EQ skills, kind of lets you know where you need to be working, right? Like, what is it that you need to be working on? Is it awareness? Is it personal competence? Is it social competence? Is it management? Like, what are the things that you need to improve on? Like, what is it that you can be better at? What are some of the things that you're good at, right? That you can, continue to improve on, or some of the things that you're struggling at, and how, like, you can build those, right? So I took one, I think it's from UC Berkeley, and it's actually just like a visual one, right? And so you're just looking at pictures of people, and while you're looking at these pictures, what you're seeing is people's emotions. And from those emotions, they give you, it's multiple choice. They give you these different emotions, and you're trying to pick the correct one. There's 20 questions, or 20 pictures of people. There's more than 20 questions. 20 pictures of people. It doesn't take a long time, like 5 minutes or so. But you go through that, and what I realized, man, is that I some of these faces, right? Some of these faces that people are making, I did not know what they were. Like, I had no word for what they were. Obviously, there was one there, like, it was like the dude was showing a face of compassion. I'm like, I don't know what that is. I don't know what face he's making. It was like a shame face. I was confused on that one. But I did end up getting a 14 out of 20, and I guess that's okay. It's above average according to the summary that they gave me. What I realized and what I noticed, and I don't know if this has anything to do with anything, but they're obviously multicultural people. The browner skinned people, especially the Black people, I did not miss a single one of those emotions. Every one of those I got right. I would say 6 or 5 out of 6 of the, like, there was like an Asian lady, what looked like a Hispanic guy. I got 5 out of 6 of those right. Where I was totally thrown off is the faces that white people were making. Unfortunately, and I don't know why that is, right? But I was better able to pick up emotion from a brown face. And I don't know what that has to do with anything. Maybe they have some research behind that, and maybe I could look it up. But I don't know, man. Like, it was really weird to notice that at the end, is like looking back at the scores of which one I got right. And I was like, man, I really can tell what Black people, like, I'm really in tune with the Black facial expression. um and that's a positive because I obviously am Black and I live in a Black community, and I move in a Black community. But I also live in America, which is a very diverse community. And if I'm not able to pick up the facial expressions of people, then as a leader, as a coach, I am not going to be able to service them properly. As a leader, because I don't really know or understand what they're going through by looking at them. I would have to ask questions and talk to them to get more out of them. And in certain situations, that's not always the case. Now, obviously, with your family, they're going to look like you. They're going to get some of their attitudes and some of the like the ways that they move from you and your significant other or your girl, your wife, your baby mama, whoever. Um, and so you'll be able to pick some of those things up a little bit better because that face that your wife makes when she's upset, your daughter makes it too. And so you kind of pick it up right away, and because kids mimic adults, they see the stuff that we do, and they understand it, yeah, a little bit better than us. We get older and we kind of forget about it. But um, I just thought that was interesting. But I think again, for you guys, for us, it's easier to see in your family if you're paying attention, right? Like if you're not looking people in the eye, you're not looking at people's faces, then being able to determine the emotion that they're eliciting is going to be a lot harder, obviously, right? So you want to make sure that when you talk, you're actually making some kind of facial contact, eye contact being best, but making some kind of facial contact where you're looking at them and they understand because their conversation is going both ways. You can see how they're reacting to the words you're saying. You can, also show them how you're reacting to the words they're saying. It provides for better conversation. Remember, conversation, right? It's not like this. Like this is a monologue. This is me talking to you and you listening. You don't get to say anything back. But a conversation, the goal is to get what's in my head into your head with as little friction as possible, right? I need to get you to understand what I'm saying. If I'm just saying it and it's bouncing off of you, and you're not receiving the message that I'm giving you, then that's not conversation, right? And we talk about relationships, and one of the big things that causes relationships to falter is communication or lack thereof, or proper communication, right? It could be a lot of talking to or talking at and not enough understanding, right? Sometimes, like with my kids, I'll say something that's maybe a little too adult for them, right? Like I'll explain something that's maybe above their level of understanding, and they just look at me, right? That means that message just bounced off of them. It did not penetrate. It did not go in. They do not understand it. So I need to be able to communicate at a level effective of their understanding, right? So that's why this emotional intelligence piece is important, because we, in a relationship and in a conversation and even in business, they found like people who have a higher IQ tend to make more money. People who have a higher IQ tend to have higher positions in their company. And so, I mean, whether you like it or not, emotional intelligence is important and it's going to be beneficial to you. So listen up as we go through this. After that after that visual test, I took a second one. I still haven't taken the book test because I had to read the book. And so I didn't go back and take the test. And they tell you you're not, stop right now, read, whatever. But I had, I have deadlines, I have things going on. So I'm gonna go back and take that one. But I took a couple other like really easy ones just on the fly. And again, this one was just a free EQ quiz. Good EQ, right? Congratulations, you have a high emotional EQ, which I thought, right? Like I feel like that in answering these questions, but I am not connected to my own emotions. Like I can't name them. And I feel like that's an issue, right? If I'm not happy and I'm not sad, then I gotta be angry, right? Isn't that weird? Like if I'm not angry and I'm not sad, then I'm not to be happy. And that's not true. I think we know that there's somewhere in between and there's some other emotions that we have. I think we only express as men, we're only in society learn to or taught to express two emotions, whether happy or we're mad, right? Somebody makes me, so we're happy, somebody upsets our happiness, we're mad. We don't have any like tools to kind of guide ourselves through the emotions. And again, that leads to a lot of issues when you're in a family, because one part of that family is not a male. They didn't come up in the same society or taught necessarily the same thing. Through proximity, they understand that men have issues with emotion, but that doesn't mean that it's okay for us to continue to. So we must continue to build out our emotional intelligence. All right. All right, stop boring you guys. I'm gonna get into the book, and kind of go over some of the book stuff. So let me pull up my notes from the book. All right. So again, like I said, there's four different parts, but I can't say that one is more important than the other. But there are like some kind of things that build a little bit. And so I'll start with self-awareness, right? Self-awareness is simply knowing what makes you tick, right? I saw somebody post the other day, and I think it was Ian Dunlap, right? The master investor on Instagram and on Twitter, I think. He posted like, people don't trigger you, they trigger your trigger, right? Like we all have a trigger. We all have that one thing, like that's a hot button issue for us, right? And self-awareness is knowing what that thing is, right? And it involves the ability to identify and understand your current emotions as well as your tendencies across situations. So we have to know, like, when I'm feeling this way, my button is easier to be pushed. When I'm feeling this way, I can protect myself against a button. I don't allow myself to be triggered or allow my trigger to be triggered, right? But when you can make sense of your feelings, you'll understand where you can excel and what motivates and fulfills you, and what type of like people and situations may trigger certain feelings, right? So self-awareness lays the foundation for the other EQ schools, right? EQ skills, right? It's that main one. So I said not one is more important than the other, but self-awareness has to be number one, because if you're not aware of self, then you can't really do these other things like management and some of these other things you're not able to do. If you heard that, right? My kid is homesick while I'm recording, and so she's messing around, going through doors and playing YouTube videos loud, right? But as we all know, kids don't care about this stuff. They do whatever they want to do, right? All right, so there's a couple of strategies. Like I said, there's strategies from each part of it, and they're pretty extensive. So I would say go get the book. And I say this about every episode, but go get the book. I'll give you a couple of them. Okay. So I talked about triggers, right? Know what triggers you. You have to know what triggers you. And I suggest, and the book suggests, that you make a list of the exact people, the exact situations, and the exact environments that trigger certain emotions, not just anger, things that trigger happiness, things that trigger excitement, things that trigger shame or guilt, or like all these different things. Like write them down. Like get a spreadsheet, right? Because when you know who and what triggers you and exactly how it irks you, right, you can learn to manage your responses, right? You know, when you're in a situation and you're in an environment that easily triggers you, okay, okay, what I need to do, how to move, right? You know how to move in a room full of vultures, as Jay-Z would say, right? Two, observe the ripple effects, right? Observe the ripple effects that your emotional outbursts may have, right? Often they continue to affect others even after the emotion is passed, right? So understand like how you acting a certain way reflects on other people. Like when you're mad, right? How is your house around you, right? Or if you're frustrated, how does that affect the people around you? Take note of how your emotions affect people, right? Ask them for feedback and then consciously choose the types of ripples you want to create, right? Do I want a happy house? Yes. If I'm the leader of that house, then I have to create a happy environment, and I have to show a happy emotion in order for those ripples around me, for my wife and my children, to also be happy, right? I'm not responsible for their happiness, right? In a relationship, you're never, listen to me, fellas, you are never responsible for your wife or your girlfriend's happiness. That is her responsibility. What you are responsible for is how you conduct yourself and your ripple effect on her happiness, right? If she needs to be happy, she has to take control of that herself, right? But you also need to be aware of how your emotions could be affecting her happiness, right? All right, so self-awareness is number one. Number two is self-management, and kind of piggybacking off of what I just said about the ripple effects and managing your emotions when you're around other people. You have to manage, right? Self-manage your emotions, right? Self-management is actually your ability to use your emotional awareness, right? That self-awareness, you have to deliberately choose what you say and do, right? It allows you to adjust and direct your responses to people and circumstances in a positive way, right? And I've talked about this before. We want to be in a situation where we can respond right? Where we can respond instead of react, right? Reaction is a knee jerk, right? If somebody hits you in the kneecap, your foot kicks forward, you have no control over that, right? You might knock something over, you might kick the doctor in the shin, right? You have no control over it though, right? Because it's a natural reaction, right? But if you were able to control a situation, you may be able to choose a better response to that, right? So self-management allows you to kind of rein your emotions in, decide whether to take action or the type of action to take, right? And we talked about in the 10X episode, the different types of action you can take. Being able to manage yourself or self-manage yourself allows you to take the proper action or the action that's necessary, right? It also involves your ability to set aside your immediate needs and focus on your longer term goals, right? A lot of times when we react, it's situational, it's in the moment, it's the thing that feels good right now, it's the thing that we act on right now. And again, just current events, right? This past weekend on the Grammys, I mean Oscars, everybody can kind of say, this or that about Will Smith and Chris Rock, right? But self-management and emotional intelligence, is that the right reaction at the right time? Is that a response? Right? Is it the right action to take? Right? If we have proper self-management, we have self-awareness, right? And if Will has more self-awareness, he's aware of how that can trigger him, right? And he knows going into it, there's a potential that somebody may say something in relation to Jada and her illness, but I am aware of that going in, and I can choose how I'm going to manage myself and how I'm going to act in that situation. If that's the case, then he's maybe able to choose a better solution to his problem or a better time to act, right? um people with strong self-management, and I think Will Smith has strong self-management. I think at times though, we are all on this scale of like being great self-managers and being bad self-managers, being great, having great awareness or having bad awareness, and things and situations kind of move us along that scale. And in that moment, he lost some self-awareness, right? He lost some self-management and he acted, right? But people who have strong self-management handle stressful situations and confrontations more effectively. They communicate better and are proactive yet patient. So he could have maybe done things a little differently. And we can all say that hindsight is 2020. He should have done things differently. But this is not the world that we lived in. It happened. Right. So once it happens, now how do you respond to what's happening? Now he has a second chance to respond. And that's where you see his acceptance speech, and then you see the apology the day later or whatever, 2 days later. As more time passes, you're better able to take the proper action, and that's why we don't want to react. Typically when we react right away, it's not the right action, right? We could take a little bit of time. The words that he said in the acceptance speech are the things he should have been holding on to when he opened up his fist and slapped Chris Rock, right? But again, there's nothing that you can do to come back from. So here's the big two takeaways from self-management is using emotion versus logic list, right? And you want to create one of these. There's a lot of writing that goes in this book. There's worksheets and all this stuff. Emotion versus logic list. So when your emotions and logic are in conflict, what do? Right? Write down a list of emotional versus logical arguments in like 2 columns. So side by side, so one right next to each other. And then ask yourself questions. Where could emotions be clouding your judgment, right? In that situation, emotions clouded his judgment. He was so emotionally charged up. He didn't think about like, what are the repercussions of if I go through with this, right? He was so emotionally charged up that he had to react instead of being in control. Where could logic be blocking emotional cues? And this is the flip side of it, right? I'm a very logical person. I like to think things through. And again, that's one of those situations where somebody says, maybe you're not emotional enough. You're like a robot, right? Because robots process the data, the information before an action is taken. They don't just do stuff. Everything is logic, right? But sometimes logic can block emotion. And in a relationship, the relationship is an emotional connection. If those emotions aren't shared both ways and you're just logic all the time, then the other side of that relationship is missing what they need, right? So writing these down to help you see each situation a little bit more clearly. And I think that's important for us to do, right? Manage your self-talk, right? Think about, I mean, you have to manage the words that you're saying to yourself. An average person has about 50,000 thoughts a day, right? And those thoughts trigger the chemical reactions in your body and they affect your emotions and behaviors. So you have to be able to control those, right? If you catch yourself with a negative thought, like, I never, I'm an idiot, it's all their fault, I'm not a good dad, like all those things, right? You have to replace them with healthier thoughts. Like, just this one time it happened, or, we should all accept responsibility. It's not all their fault, it's everyone's fault, right? Everybody has some role to play in it. But you have to be able to manage your self-talk, because what you say about you to you believe, whether you like it or not, because it's implanted in your brain twice. Like, you thought it and then you said it, then it's twice, right? You said it and you heard it and you thought it, right? Like, it's compounding, right? And so we have to be able to think happy thoughts like Peter Pan, right? And that's how they get to fly, right? Number three, you want to improve your social awareness, right? So now we've talked about knowing thyself, and managing yourself. Now you have to be able to be socially aware, and this is where that picture, EQ quiz that I took probably comes a little bit more into play, because in social settings, we're reading body language, we're reading facial expressions, we're reading like the way people move, how the crowd is moving. When you're in a certain room, you understand what's going on in the room. Like I said, read the room. It's one of the things I tell my daughter all the time, is you got to learn how to read the room. You got to understand your situation, your surroundings, and those around you. You have to have some awareness, right? An awareness level of the small society around you, and it's the society at large. The social awareness is your ability to accurately tune into others' emotions and understand what's really going on with them, right? And sometimes I struggle with this because um, I'm, like I said, I'm a little more logical than I am emotional, a little bit more like a robot, right? And sometimes my wife will have an emotion. I don't know, I'm not going to put a label on it. She'll have an emotion, but then she'll do what I do, and she goes, "You know what? I don't want to talk about it right now. I just need a moment." For me, I don't want to talk about it right now. I need a moment means I'm going to process it. I'm going to handle it. You don't have to worry about it. I got it. For her, it means give me a minute and then we're going to talk about it again. And we're going to go right back to it, which is a little different. And it's harder for me to hear those words and see that action and then remember, oh, wait, we still got to come back to it, right? We got to solve it together. Or else it's going to linger and turn into something even bigger and even worse for all of us. And so that's something that I still admittedly struggle with in this moment. I'm struggling with it right now. It's something that I have to continue to work on, because it triggers, okay, she got it. She's taking a moment so she can process it, and she's going to be okay when we come back together. Right. Because that's what it would mean for me. And maybe I wouldn't, and she would say that you didn't process it, you just bottled it up and you bring it out later. And that may be the case, but I'm not bringing it out right now. um, and obviously I need to go talk to somebody about that. And we all do, right? I think therapy and talking to somebody, homies, friends, or whatever, having the conversations about it is important. But I digress, right? We're talking about social awareness, not me going to therapy. This requires willingness, right? It requires a willingness and ability to understand others' perspectives, even if they differ from yours. Again, this is what I'm talking about. I have to understand from their point of view, right? From their perspective. When you're having a conversation with somebody, it's two sides. It's not listening to answer, it's listening to understand. So you have to be able to try to understand where they're coming from, even if it's different from yours, right? In order for you to build your social awareness, you must be fully present, listen, and observe. And that's something that I think we struggle with more and more every day because of things like social media. Our attention span is getting shorter and shorter. If you see like the reels, it was 7 seconds. Like 7 seconds was like last month. It was like 7-second videos, or like, they're promoting 7-second videos. Now it's like 5 seconds. And it's only been a month. Like we cut 2 whole seconds off of that, right? 5-second videos are getting promoted now, right? We're shortening and shortening and shortening our attention span to eventually we're going to be like goldfish, right? And so as men, as fathers, as leaders, we have to work on broadening our attention span, broadening our ability to be fully present in a moment, broadening our ability to listen with empathy, broadening our ability to observe our surroundings and our social settings, so that we understand how we can move in our environment, right? And a lot of dudes will say, it's my house, it's my rules, and I don't have to learn how to move in my environment. My environment moves around me, and that's all real cool alpha male talk. but that's also single male talk, right? Alpha is the first and only, right? Only means you're lonely, homie. You don't want that, right? So you have to silence your own self-talk, right? And give the other person your full attention and be willing to consider his or her point of view as if it were your own. If it were you in those shoes, how would you feel? And in order for you to do that, you need to understand your feelings, because you can't put yourself in somebody else's shoes to understand how they feel if you don't understand feelings themselves, right? Okay, so here's the two strategies, two things you can do to improve your social awareness. There's like 15 more in the book, but here's two of them, right? Do a 15-minute walkabout, right? Every workday, observe people, right? Take a 15-minute break, walk around work, walk around the building, look at people, watch them move, right? Look at their workspaces, look at how they interact with each other, try to pick up their moods and social clues. You can do this in your house, right? Instead of coming home, sitting on the couch, go to your kids' room, see what they're doing. Take a look around, see what it looks like. Go to your wife, wherever your wife is, hang out with her for 15 minutes, talk about work, talk about life, talk about anything, right? Walk around the house, see what's going on in the crib. If you've been working all day and you just get home and you know what I mean, you eat, plop down on the couch and watch sports until it's time to go to bed, you are missing opportunities to understand the social, there's like the social aspect of your own home, right? And the only way to improve that is to be present in it. Okay. Then check for accuracy, right? If you're unsure about a cue that someone's giving you, like a social, it's like a social cue or a social emotion that someone's giving you, you can confirm your interpretation. Just ask a reflective question, right? Like, I'm not sure if what I'm seeing is right, right? So you seem sad, and then ask it like, so state what you see, right? State what you see, right or wrong, and be ready for whatever happens next. And then ask a direct question. And this is, again, something that I struggle with, right? I will see my wife, my kid, or whatever. And because I would just internalize whatever my situation is and keep rocking, I don't ask these questions. I don't go, hey, you know what? You seem sad. Did something happen? I'll be like, yo, are you okay? And people's typical answer to you okay is, yeah, I'm okay. All right, cool. I'm done, right? And that is not emotionally intelligent, and that is not socially aware, right? Even if I ask, you seem sad, and they go, no, I'm not sad, well, then there's an opportunity for them to give you what it is that they're feeling or what the issue is, right? And so you have to open up that door and be prepared for that conversation. All right, moving right along. Relationship management, right? We talked about self-managing, now relationship management. Now, this is going to be really important, obviously, as a father and a husband and a boyfriend or a baby daddy or whatever your role is. Most importantly for this podcast as father, relationship management is your ability to apply the emotional awareness of yourself and others to manage your relations. So if you're aware of yourself, you're able to self-manage, you're socially aware. Now you bring that into your relationships, right? This includes effective communication, conflict management, and forging bonds. Again, all things that are extremely important as a father. You have to effectively communicate what you want from your children. You have to effectively communicate to your significant other. You have to be able to resolve and manage conflicts between maybe your two kids, or between you and your wife or girlfriend or baby mama, whoever. And then you're forging bonds, right? You're forging bonds with your kids. You want to have a strong bond with your children. Managing your relationships is part of that emotional intelligence that we all need to have, right? These skills, the skills I talk about, communication, conflict management, and forging bonds, are extremely important during the stressful times, or during the conflict, right? When people either A, give in to their anger and frustration, or B, they avoid the conflict and let it fester because they don't know how to handle it. Again, this is something that I struggle with, and this is I'm being as open as I can. I don't typically give in to anger and frustration because, like I said, I'm kind of middle of the road. It could be worse kind of situation. But I have and do still at times avoid the conflict and let it fester because I just don't know what to do with it. Right. Like I don't want to talk about my own problems. I definitely don't want to talk about yours. Right. I can manage conflict once it happens. Right now, if we're in a beef, I can handle that. Like we can talk about it or figure it out. But if the conflict hasn't officially happened, like it ain't officially jumped off yet, I'm like, yo, let's leave it. There's some beef in here, there's some tension, but I ain't trying to stir it up. And when you don't stir it up though, that's when it starts to rot. It stews and it rots and it becomes worse and worse. And so I'm learning, fellas. I'm learning. I'm right along with you, dog. I ain't perfect at all. You know, me and my lady have been together for 24 years or 25 years, some 25 years. And it's had its ups and downs. I think we are the happiest as we've ever been over the last few years for sure. But it still comes with its ups and downs. It still's got its struggles. I'm still working on improving and getting better. And as is she. And this is one of those things, right? Avoiding conflict. I think we all do it. I hear from my homies all the time, like, man, look, I ain't trying to step in my foot into that. Let me just get out your way and just stay out of your way. I'm gonna go to work. You go do your thing. I'm gonna come home. You go do your, like, let's just stay out of each other's way. But that's not a successful way to manage a situation, right? We definitely need to be involved. We definitely need to be talking, communicating, managing the conflict, forging stronger bonds, right? Because when you don't avoid the conflict and you step in and you talk about it, you're showing her that you care about her and how she feels in her situation. The same for your kids. They feel like, you know, they don't care what you know until they know that you care. That's it right there, right? So here's a couple of strategies to help you improve your relationship management. Number one, stop giving mixed signals. I mean, I think that's what we do a lot, right? We act like everything is all right, but inside everything is not. Right. So be aware when your body language conveys a different message from your words. You're saying everything's cool, but you're walking around all pissed off and your shoulders are shrugged and you look all tense. People can tell the difference, right? It doesn't look genuine. Everything all good, but you know your face is all screwed up. It's not true. And if anybody knows you well, it's your kids, right? They know you better than you think, and your wife, they know you better than you think. So stop pretending, man. If you know you're giving mixed signals, explain why. You know, maybe you're still upset over an earlier incident, and you're not over the current conversation, but you're trying to move on with peace, right? Maybe you can explain that, like, look, hey, I'm not over what happened earlier today. I'm still kind of frustrated, but I would like to. I'm trying to, remain positive and kind of continue pushing forward through the day, and we can kind of come back to it later on, because I still have some things that I want to talk about. But right now, in the moment, I don't want to lose or give in to my anger or frustration. You'd be amazed how that works, man. You'd be amazed how it works. I'm amazed how it works, and I don't do it enough, right? Respect and recognize others' feelings, regardless of whether you agree with them or not. Listen, in every conversation, there is not a right and wrong. Like, I think we think as men, everything's competition, right? So you're either winning or you're losing. But that's not how this is. Nobody wins, nobody loses. We come to an agreement. So you have to respect and recognize her feelings in a situation or your kids' feelings in a situation. This is a big one because I think, especially in the Black community or any community, there's like this fight for respect, right? Because we feel like we don't get it enough socially. So we damn sure gonna get it in our household, and these kids are gonna respect me and all that, right? And so we're fighting for respect, and so we ignore their feelings as people because they're subordinate to us. They're kids and we're adults or whatever, right? But that's not cool, right? Because how, like I always say, I tell the guys that I work with, this is that you are not raising children. I think that's the big misconception. You're raising adults, because when you're done raising them, when you're finished with the raising them, they're going to be adults. So you're raising them from now until adulthood. So if you are teaching them now that their feelings don't matter and they don't get to be respected by people of authority over them, and you're teaching them the wrong things, right? You're not teaching them how that they can be better, how they need to be served, how they need to be taken care of. So that's an important thing. That's my wife right now calling in the middle of the podcast. um, but anyway, I'm almost done. We'll wrap it up. So respect the feelings. Don't dismiss or try to change these feelings. Like, listen carefully and summarize what you've heard to show your understanding and your concern. I think that's one of the most important things is dismissing other people's feelings because you don't feel them. It's not cool. Again, something I struggle with because I'm in the middle. I'm like, that ain't that bad. You tripping. Or that ain't, you tripping. That ain't that bad. It could be worse, right? But that's not cool because their feelings are important. right? In the book, there's 66 strategies. I gave you 8 of them, right? I gave you 8 of them. 66 strategies that you can use that can help you. Of the 8 I used, those were the 8 that I felt like were kind of the most poignant to fatherhood, but they're all really good. I say go ahead and get a copy of the book, Emotional Intelligence 2.0. If you don't have time to read it, there's plenty of book summaries of it out there, but you do need to do one of these EQ quizzes, maybe multiple. They don't take very long. They're all pretty short. But you need to understand where your self-awareness is, where your self-management is, where your relationship management is, where your social awareness is. Again, if you're listening to this podcast, it's always my assumption that you're trying to be the best possible father you can be. And if that is the case, then you need to be the most emotionally intelligent father you can be. It's not about your IQ, it's about your EQ. So it's important that you build up your EQ in order to build solid foundation for your relationships and understanding for your relationships. So with that being said, man, I'm going to go ahead and wrap this thing up. I'm going to get out of here. I know I went a little longer than maybe I wanted to, but it felt good. Felt good to share this emotional intelligence, and hopefully you guys got something out of it. I look forward to you catching up with you guys next week. I've been talking about it, been teasing it out a little bit. Got guests coming on pretty soon. I think next week's episode might be a first guest episode in a while. Excited to start talking to other fathers. And hell, here's one thing. And I know I said I was going to shut it down, but here's one thing that I think is really cool. I'm making a commitment to get to know my own father a little bit better. Not sure that he's going to want to be on an episode of the podcast, but I am going to get to know him a lot more. Like, not that I didn't know him. Don't get it misconfused or misconstrued. I know my father. I've known my father my whole life, but I want to get to know him more, right? Because I know that I get the way that I am a lot of times from him, and I'm guarded with my emotions, and I'm assuming he's guarded with his emotions because I don't know. So I'm trying to get him on an episode of the podcast, man, and see if I can talk to him a little bit and share his fatherhood journey, share my fatherhood journey with him. But we shall see, right? I'll keep you guys updated on how that goes, what I'll learn from him. I told you a couple weeks ago, I talked to my mom's husband, who had been in her life for 20 something years. I talked to him a little bit about fatherhood, and I shared that with you guys. And so I'm going to continue to do that, sharing my own fatherhood journey, because as I'm on my journey, it's important to know where I came from, and in order to know where I'm going. All right, fellas, I'm a sign off, and I'll talk to you next week. I think, if I can get this thing to close.